Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 166, Writing Murder and Mayhem, an interview with Natalie Walters, coming to you on Thursday, November 21st, 2019. I have to say, I think I have the luckiest, most awesome job in the world, because even if I am tired, it's the end of the day, I'm ready to start thinking about brushing my teeth and reading and going to sleep. But no, I have an interview on the other side of the world. And so morning for her is evening for me. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to stay awake and sound awake and interested and, when it's bedtime for me? And yet, here I am having this fantastic conversation with Natalie Walters. It is so far past my bedtime by the time we actually hung up and said goodbye and turned off the camera. You only got a portion of our talk, and it was a really fun portion. But I had to stop it, or else you'll be like, these podcast interviews are too long, Kitty. We like them, but they're too long. So here I am. Now I am so wired from talking to this energetic, enthusiastic, fantastic, fun woman that I can't fall asleep. So I have to read in bed for like an hour to fall asleep. Part of the reason it was an hour is because I was reading her book, which is romantic suspense, which is not what you read when you're trying to fall asleep. All that to say, fun times ahead for you listening to me and Natalie talk about so many things, including where to hide the body, which is always a fun conversation that you can have without feeling any guilt about it. This is going to be fun for you, I think. And if you're working on your NaNoWriMo novel and you're writing really fast, all of the energy and enthusiasm that we have during the interview, I think will pep you up and keep you going. We also sort of accidentally end up doing a lot of brainstorming during the interview just because she says something which makes me think of something, which makes her think of something. And we're like, oh yeah, we could do this. We could write that. And so it's also great if you're like, yeah, I need some brainstorming energy. Listen to this interview with Natalie. She's great at brainstorming. She says it's her favorite part of the writing process. And I can totally see why after talking to her for a couple hours. So I don't really have any other announcements to make this week. Next week, I will wish you a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the U.S. or if you're an American living someplace else. But this week, I think is just all about writing, and listening to somebody give you lots of enthusiastic energy as they talk about their new book. So here we go. Let's talk to Natalie. Today's guest is Natalie Walters. Natalie is the author of Living Lies and the new sequel, Deadly Deceit. A military wife of 22 years, she currently resides in Hawaii with her soldier husband and their 3 kids. She writes full-time and has been published in Proverbs 31 magazine and has blogged for Guideposts online. In addition to balancing life as a military spouse, mom, and writer, she loves connecting on social media, sharing her love of books, cooking, and traveling. Natalie comes from a long line of military and law enforcement veterans and is passionate about supporting them through volunteer work, races, and writing stories that affirm no one is defined by their past. Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. We were just talking, we're like literally almost on the opposite sides of the world right now.
Yes. Yeah. You're in the cooler, beautiful, wintry weather, and I'm minus the snow, and I'm in the hot, sweaty. I shouldn't complain. People love to, people come here, but I prefer a little bit of temperature change.
Yes. I have to say, after a lot of years of living in Southern California, Arizona, Australia, I am so excited. I'm back into similar to Michigan weather, which is where I'm from, which is a lot of days have 3 seasons in one day, which is great. And then there's 14 seasons in the year, which I love.
Yes. We were in Texas, and it's like that. You have it'll be 46, and then the next day it'll be 85. So you just don't know how to dress. You just keep all your clothes in the closet because
right.
You could be bundled up, or you could be in nothing, in shorts and t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also have a lot of humidity here. So I would dress for a Michigan 42 degree day and be kind of weirdly sweaty. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's freezing cold out and I'm a little
Right.
sweaty. And then my friend was explaining, well, it's very humid here. Like she didn't know if it was more humid, but she's like, it's very humid here. So you have to try to figure out like how to dress in a way that you haven't like overdressed for humidity as well. And I'm like, okay, this is getting really complicated.
Right. That is too complicated.
Yeah,
I know,
that's right.
it's like layers, you were taught as a kid to like dress in layers so you could like peel off or put back on, but that humidity takes it to like a whole other ball game. You just like, I give up. Like I give up.
Exactly. All right. So I've been dying to ask you this question. As a runner, I have to know if races in your bio means that you're a runner and you run races.
It did.
Okay.
Probably should update that bio. I haven't run any races recently. And when I say races, I don't mean like competitive. I'm just like, let me cross the finish line. And
That's me.
that tends to be like my prayer at the like final miles. I'm like, oh Lord, please just let me get over. Don't let me quit because all I want to do is quit. But yeah, I've done a couple. I did 2 half marathons. I did a couple of 10Ks and I remember when I ran my half marathon, I was like, I will never do this again. Like I see the runners who like veer off to like continue the full marathon. And I'm like, they have my utmost respect, but they're also psychopaths because it is painful. And I don't know. So I ended up getting a stress fracture. And after that, I kind of was like, okay, I think my body, this is my excuse. My body is telling me, you're done, girl. Like, go for walks. It's nice. You get to take in the scenery. And I listen to the audiobook. So it's much nicer. When I'm running, I need to listen to music to kind of keep me motivated. But when I'm walking, I can listen to audiobooks, which is much, much nicer. Unless I'm listening to suspense or like bio stuff on like murders. And then I get jumpy when I'm walking. So then I tend to pick up my pace a little bit more. But yeah, so I have done some races, but I wouldn't call what I do racing or running. Right. It's more of a jog.
Yeah. Yeah. When I realized how fast other, I don't know, normal people run, I was like, well, okay, that means that what I really am doing is jogging, but I'm just going to call it running because it makes me feel better.
That's right. It's like, it's like before I was published, I always tell you like, okay, are you a writer or are you an author or is it a hobby or is it a job? And I was like, I'm writing. So I'm a writer. So I'm an author now because it's been published, but I'm a writer.
Right. Oh man. Well, I've got lots of energy right now and this is fun talking to well, okay. So romantic suspense, I know is the appropriate title for the category, but I'm like, this is really fun talking to somebody about murder right now because I just now, like 20 minutes ago, finished watching The Shining, which I didn't realize I hadn't seen it. I didn't realize all the things that I remembered about it were only from trailers and clips that I had seen my whole life. I'm watching it going, I don't think I've actually seen this movie. And it was deliciously, delightfully scary. I'm like, holy crap. And I know it's happening. I mean, I know it's going to happen.
Right.
The scenes that are in all the trailers that you've seen your whole life. And I'm like, okay, this is still really scary. I'm loving this.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of like I wouldn't call them horror. I think scary is like the appropriate description for them. They're scary movies, but I love the older ones because I feel like they use like the foreshadowing of music and like, what's going to happen. And I think that's what causes you to like, kind of like start to like freak out a little bit. For me, it gets me like on the edge of my seat to where I have to force myself to stay seated. I think I probably tried to walk out of Misery like 4 or 5 times because I could not handle the suspense. I was like, oh my gosh, I know what's going to happen. I just can't handle it. And I feel like the movies now sort of just like, there's a whole thing with writers, like you show, you don't tell. I think there's more telling these days in these movies that you're like, okay, it's just going to be a bunch of like gory, gruesome, whatever. And I mean, that's not necessarily scary. It's just gross.
Yeah.
Like my imagination plays far worse games with me than what I can see on television. So
yeah, definitely. Well, my fingers are crossed. The reason why we watched The Shining tonight is because, so it's Wednesday now when you and I are talking, and on Friday we're going to go see Dr. Sleep, which is apparently the 30 years later what happened next.
Oh my goodness. I was like, so we saw the preview for that and I was telling my daughter, I was like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be crazy if like the whole, like every Stephen King movie ever created was the imagination of one guy put under like by his psychiatrist, and like every like that he like literally was feeding him all these like movies, and that's how all these like movies exist. It was like just this huge dream world. I was like, I could totally see Stephen King doing that.
Yeah,
and like all of us out like this whole time we've just been living in one man's head for every movie.
Yeah, like The Matrix, but in a horror movie.
Yes, yeah. That, I mean, you know, it's one of those things like Stephen King's one of those like guys, like you kind of be creeped out to meet, but you'd also be really fascinated to like, can we just talk? Like, just tell me. I've got one of his books. He did a writing book.
Yes.
And it's really, really good because it kind of talks about like his childhood and how he kind of came to like have these ideas for like Carrie. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy has like, it's kind of like you get to go into his brain a little bit. It was really, really good. So
yeah.
I really enjoyed that book.
Yeah, me too. I just listened to it on audio as well a couple of months ago. And it's so cool, like listening to him tell the story, you know, and he's good enough at it that it really doesn't feel so much like he's reading a book, is that he's just telling you the story of, you know,
I'll have
his
to
life
listen
as a
to
writer.
it on audio because I was just going to ask if he was the one doing the narration, but I think it would be fun to do it on audio as well.
Yeah, totally. He's absolutely one of those people that I would like enter a contest to win, you know, lunch with Stephen King, just so you could sit there and talk to him.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And you know, it's interesting. I did a writing program with Jerry Jenkins.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, a friend of mine, we were getting ready to go to lunch, and Jerry came out and looked at me talking like, oh, me and Jerry are friends.
Yeah.
He came out with like 2 other authors. And we were like, hey, because he was familiar, it was in Colorado. We were like, where's a good place to eat? He's like, oh, there's this pizza place. Do you want to join us? And I was like, yeah. So we like went there, and he's telling us the story about how he and Stephen King are friends and, you know, acquaintances, or, you know, they're on friendly enough terms that they've talked with each other a couple times. And they had a mutual friend who was in a motorcycle accident. And so they were raising funds to help him recover or whatever. And so that's how they actually got to meet and got to know each other. And I thought, this is crazy, like how you would have Stephen King with like Jerry Jenkins. You would never see or think that the two of them would be together or whatever. But I think I think that's really neat. I think that's like the way like story world is. Like you could be in a totally different genre and meet somebody else, and you become instant friends for the love of stories. So right. I think that's the best part of books.
Yeah, exactly. I was at a birthday party on Monday night with one of the fellows that I used to work with, and my husband still works with at the video game company, which is the reason why we moved here. John got a job at Massive Entertainment, which makes video games.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's totally fun. Yeah.
My son would be all over that right now. He'd be like, what?
Well, you can tell your son, Massive is one of the Ubisoft companies, and we're the company that made the Division and the Division 2. So, the Division 2 just came out a few months ago, and now we're working on, I guess I can say. So, John's working on Avatar, and I had just a 9-month contract where I was working on Avatar.
That is so cool. I'm going to have to like pick your brain for like story ideas. You're giving me all kind of stuff going on in my head right now.
Well, you know, and now we're going to do one of those like spaghetti circular reference things. Like one of my questions later is going to be, so according to your press release, brainstorming is one of your favorite things. So, all right. So we'll circle around to that. Yes. I love it. So it was me and 2 guys who've been making video games for, 20 or whatever years. Like they've both been in the industry a long time. And we're talking about story and the power of story and like what story does in people's lives and why it's important. It's not just entertainment. Like it moves people. And I was like, this is my most favorite thing in the whole world, just talking about story like this.
Yes, I am the same way. I think it's funny because I, as an author, we have to do our own marketing, and that nothing freaks me out more than having to like tell people about like my books or my, because I'm like, oh, this is like, I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I can speak all day long about other people's books. I could sell you them. I could like, by the time I'm done talking with you, you'd be like, all right, I'm buying all these books. But it was funny because I was doing a Facebook Live with for the release of Deadly Deceit, and they were asking me about the new one, and I was going 100 miles a minute because I was so excited. And then I like realized like I actually forgot that I wrote the book. I was like, oh yeah, I wrote, but so a lot of people were like, we were so excited to see you get excited for your story. And it really is. It's just that I love the story and the characters. And so once I like take myself out of that equation, it's easier for me to be excited, you know, to be able to be my true self about stories, which is over the top excited.
It wouldn't surprise me if there are secretly, so that the publishing houses don't really know, some authors who work for the same publisher who are writing each other's social media stuff so that you can be excited about someone else's story and not feel weird that you're talking about your story. And then send them to each other, and then you post what the other person said. You're like, yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I really need to take some notes on that one. That's a good idea.
The secret underground network. Don't tell.
That's right. That's right. Nobody knows.
Well, listen, let's actually talk a little bit about your book. So this is book 2 of a new series. Actually, book 1 was your debut book, right?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we kind of start at the beginning? Since we only have to go back one book, let's start at the beginning. Tell us your story, how you got involved, and then how it all happened for you.
So my first book is Living Lies, and I probably will go back just a little bit on just how I started that story. I had been writing for a couple of years, seeking publication. I, in fact, started story in Egypt when we were living there, and was pitching that actually. And it just wasn't, it was getting interest, but not enough to like spark a contract or publish or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm going to start writing something else. And at the time that I started brainstorming ideas, and when I say brainstorming, I meant like, I don't know what to write, what's selling out there, what do I like to write? So my daughter, she started having some issues with depression and anxiety. And so our life kind of spiraled a little bit out of control, just because we'd never really had a firsthand experience with this kind of topic or issue. And as we were trying to deal with that, we ran into a lot of stigma and a lot of opinions and a lot of just, you know, questions and not know who to go to or who to turn to. So I funneled that into my writing, and I created a character first type of story. So normally I think I tend to be more plot driven. Like I have an idea for like, oh, I want to have a story, but then I figure out who my characters are. And on this particular story, I was like, I have a character who is suffering from depression and having to face the stigma that surrounds that. And how do you survive that? And how do you get help if you can't even talk about it? So that's where it started. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to start putting being obstacles in her way and figure out how she's going to like move through that. And, you know, and it was interesting because when I originally came up with the idea for Lane, I kind of wanted her to be this in a small town where she was going to work with the sheriff to kind of solve crimes, because no one really pays attention to her. She's kind of in the background, and then eventually, like by book 3 in my head, I was like, okay, and then it would be revealed that this person who nobody paid attention to is actually got a very important value and purpose in the town. And so that was kind of how her name came to be. So it's Lane, like Lois Lane, and then Kent. So it was Lane Kent, because it was kind of going to be like, oh, she's this superhero kind of a, you know, character. And then of course the entire story changed. It didn't end up being that at all. And so I wrote, so when I started her story, so I started her journey in Virginia. We had got a new assignment to Georgia. So then I was in Georgia, and I was driving my son to middle school, and you had to go down this really long road that had all these trees, and it was marshy, swampy land. And I was like, oh, that'd be a really good place for a body.
Yes.
And so that was how it happened. I was like, all right, this is how it happened. So the Living Lies story started as a therapy for me, but then progressed into the plot line. And then I wrote that story, pitched it to agents and editors, and I had to get an agent first. So got that, and she started helping me with the romance element of it, because I was like, I don't know how to write romance. I like romance. I just don't know how to write romance. So
Yeah.
she helped me with that a little bit. And then we pitched it and got a 3-book contract with Ravel. And now I guess it's like history, but it's only been like 1 year. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been longer than that, like the writing, like from contract to now, but it feels like, oh my goodness, I've got 2 books in 1 year. That's crazy. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's very cool. So, Deadly Deceit is book 2, and you and I are talking to each other in mid-November, and it came out in October, right?
it came out November 5th.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just this month. Yeah.
So just
yeah,
2 weeks.
Yeah, just 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah. It's been a crazy whirlwind, but
Oh,
it's been
man.
fun.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about the book.
So, Living Lies, I'm going to go, I feel like I'm going backwards, but I'm going to start with Living
Go
Lies
backwards.
because
That's all right.
it's part of a series, but they can be standalone books. So in Living Lies, you'll go through Lane's story with, her and how she's going through, like, you get introduced to the town, some of the townspeople, get introduced to her love interest, Deputy Charlie Lynch. And then book 2 is like a progression of the series, but not their story. So it takes a whole new, hero and heroine. So we have Deputy Ryan Frost, who is Charlie's best friend in Living Lies, and the quirky, kind of nerdy, goofy deputy. He comes back in book 2 and is the hero. And then a very unlikely heroine is the reporter Vivian DeMarco, who is not well received in Living Lies for her tenacious, crossing the line type personality. And I was really worried because I had already turned that book in before Living Lies was released. And I got a lot of people who were like, we don't like Vivian DeMarco. And I was like, I don't know. So I was really nervous, but I'd already turned the story in. So I was like, well, we're just going to have to roll with this one.
Yeah.
So I was very conscious to make sure, because I really I don't necessarily have a love relationship with reporters, but I understand they have a job to do, but I guess it was more of me trying to find out why they do the job they do or why they are the way they are. And I think I was able to do that with Vivian's character in Deadly Deceit, was be able to watch her transform. So all of that to say that this story starts with Vivian DeMarco being back in Walton, which is where she does not want to be because of the previous book, and kind of hides herself away, but she's working for the local paper and gets a phone call from her boss, who tells her he's got a story for her and wants to meet her late at, it's kind of late at night. He's coming home from a basketball game, and she goes to meet him, and he dies in front of her and doesn't get to tell her that story. So she is, bereft because he was also her ticket out of Walton, and is concerned about that. And she starts to dig for the story. And then they come to learn that his death may not have been as natural as they thought it was. And so she starts doing her journalistic duties and her reporter thing. And Ryan is now kind of heading the charge on this case and is like at his wit's end with this tenacious reporter, but he also thinks she's real pretty. So, so of course he's got to keep her in line, but he also has a soft spot for her. So it was a lot of fun to write those characters.
Nice. Now, so we heard in your bio that military and law enforcement people are part of your natural history. So in book 1 and book 2, both have a hero who is in law enforcement. Do you think that this is probably sort of a trend that you're going to see in your writing for the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with romantic suspense is, I remember I had a mentor who told me, like, the problem with like romantic suspense is that you have to have somebody who's got some sort of law enforcement, in them, because otherwise, how do you do the investigation part, or how do you protect or whatever? So I put some thought into that, but I know, so in book 3, which is coming out in March, Silent Shadows, the character is not law enforcement. Now, they do work with law enforcement, but he's actually military intelligence, or prior military intelligence. And so he has that sort of investigative background himself, but there's not actually 2 characters with that. And so I think they kind of tell you, write what you know. And so growing up with my dad, who was a police officer and then became a judge, and then my brother was a sheriff deputy, and then being in the military, of course, we have lots of friends in different federal agencies. So I can draw from all of those experiences and kind of take their stories and kind of twist them around. But it's nice to have them, because then if I have a question, I have like actual people I can go to and be like, hey, tell me about this, you know, and I know I probably get stuff wrong. I mean, that's just the course of writing fiction, but at the same time, it's fiction. So, you know, if you can watch some of that stuff that's on television, and, you know, then you can read a book and overlook that error.
That's right. That's right. One of my favorite TV shows is Castle with Nathan Fillion. And I'm on season 5. I've been like just giving myself just 1 or 2 episodes every here and there, because like I want to make it last as long as possible. And I had to, like you, yeah. And like you, move around a lot. And so like couldn't watch it when it was actually on TV. So I'm like, okay, that's right. I'll just like watch just a little bit of each of the DVDs and try to make it last a long time. And there's this one part where I'm just like, I love Lainey, the medical examiner, love her, but and I love this show. And so like, however, like there'll be like 1 or 2 times where I'm like, okay, she just said like a whole bunch of things in 3 sentences that would have taken her at least a couple of days to figure out, I think, you know, and I'm like, okay, that's all right. I choose to believe her.
That's right. I know. I'm watching the new season of Jack Ryan.
Oh,
and
yes.
Which I like it. I enjoy the show very much. I had a question, and one of the things they did in episode 1, but my mom explained it to me, and I was like, okay, I can get that. They didn't really hint at it too strongly, so it went over my head completely. But the last episode that I watched, and I don't want to give away anything in case anybody hasn't caught up with them, but there's a scene where somebody attacks Jack Ryan. Obviously, he's going to get attacked in every episode. And they put a plastic bag over his head to kind of like suffocate him. And I can't tell you how many times I have talked to my children while we've watched the show, and I'm like, what would you do if this was happening? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you break the plastic. It's just plastic. Like you poke a hole in your mouth and you breathe. But I'm telling you, Jack Ryan was sitting there struggling, and I was like, dude, come on. You're CIA. That should be like 101. I mean, I feel like anybody who's watched any kind of movie should know you just pop the plastic. So, you know, for your listening viewers, if you ever find yourself with a plastic wrap around your head, just poke, you know, put your fingers through it and you can breathe. Yeah, that's right. But yes, I was like, oh no, come on. And I don't know like why that was such a, like, it seems weird to me that was something that like would be overlooked by like the writers or the directors of that, but it was, and I guess it just made for better. I mean, I don't know.
More
y'all have to watch that episode.
Yeah. I try to tell myself, okay, this is like the heavy duty shipping container wrap that you wouldn't be able to get your fingers through. and I just, you know, do that thing where I just choose to believe that this is what's going on. But you'd think that you would at least see the person trying to poke a hole where their mouth is.
Right. I mean, with your adrenaline pumping, it'd be like Hulk hands. You should, you know, you might be able to break through that.
That's right.
I feel like plastic tarp, but
I know, right? Yeah.
Okay. And then you have to wonder like why he would have industrial size plastic around him, because did he plan on suffocating? It just goes into a whole bunch of questions.
Exactly. Which in some ways is part of what can get me totally stuck. Like I'll start going down this circular path that's like a labyrinth of what if, and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, Kitty, choose one. Just all of them are fine ideas. Just choose one. But you're like, but what if this? But if you do this, then why not that? And why wouldn't you? And wouldn't he have, you know, blah, blah, blah in his pocket? He could just, you know.
Right.
Better to accidentally cut your tongue with the knife that you always keep in your pocket than to suffocate.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, he did have a knife in his pocket because he used it. And so, hello? Like you just like, that literally just like a light bulb in my head. Oh, he did have a knife in his pocket, but chose not to use it. So yeah, because at the end of the day, you have like readers or viewers who are asking those questions. Like we're pretty smart now because they don't hide anything on television anymore. Like they show you like all the steps, and, you know, you watch, you know, the CSI and you can solve a crime in 30 minutes or whatever. But, you know, so we readers and viewers are going to ask those questions. So you'd better have some sort of explanation, or at least a relative good reason to be like, okay, I can see how that, that happened, like that took place,
Yeah.
So, which happened in episode 1, but my mom explained it with it like, well, and I'm like, okay, I could see that,
Yeah. And it's fun, but also like just really hard, because especially if you start thinking about the last TV show that you saw that you were like, well, why didn't he just, and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, how many readers are going to be like, well, why doesn't he or she just, and you'll be like, I need to make sure that I have this like a really solid reason.
Yes, no, that definitely is a fear. And I always feel like when I'm trying to come up with ways to like put my heroine into suspenseful or dangerous situation, I'm like, I feel like you have to be so creative, because at the end of the day, it's always going to be someone stalking them, mugging them, breaking into them, doing something to their car. So it's like, okay, how do I make this something that's like different, and then be able to explain it in a way that like, okay, because I mean, if somebody's car exploded in your neighborhood, you'd be kind of like, okay, this is weird. And you'd have a lot of questions, because that's not a normal everyday thing,
Yeah.
So, but then if you like explain it like, oh, well, that person was building a car and was pulling his stuff off of, the internet. Okay. He didn't know what he was doing.
Right.
That explains it.
Yeah. In fact, now you got me thinking, okay, so the next time I should do something where she's trying to start it, she's just getting the click, and she does it again and just gets the click, and she jumps out of the car and, calls the police. And I think someone's put a bomb in my car, because she's seen this on TV. Yes. Like if it's just a click, like do not try starting your car again. It will explode. But right. Then, what she finds out is she's just got a dead starter, which also makes the exact same sound.
Right. Exactly. But it heightens the suspense, because now she's like, okay, she's been taken off her guard.
Exactly.
Now she's not going to know when it's coming.
Yes, exactly. Okay, you and I should just like write some stories together.
That's right.
We're on the same page.
I think so. That's right.
Well, one of the other things that you mentioned in your press release was that you had, and pardon me if I'm misquoting you, a really fun time figuring out the murder in this particular book.
I did. So I talked earlier about Living Lies starting as a character-based story. This one was, I knew who my characters were, but it was the method of murder that I was like, oh, this is good. I like this. And I didn't know who I was going to kill at the time. And I was really sad when I discovered, like, when I was like, oh, I got to kill this character. Because I really wanted him to have a long, I wanted him to make it to the end. Yeah. But it just wouldn't work that way, because I needed his death to kind of like, push Vivian in that direction. But it was very fun. I thought it's a little scary how excited I get about how I'm going to like murder one of my characters.
Yeah.
But I was especially excited about this method, because I was like, this is something that like, I don't know. I'm sure if I used to do research on this, there's probably somebody who was actually murdered in this manner. It'd be kind of freaky, but I think it's more of like the way that it happens. I was like, oh, how could I, but I like it. I think it was a lot of fun. And then when I learned who the murderer was, I was like, oh, because the method was so unique that I was like, it has to be a character that you'd be like, oh, I would not have expected that. So
yeah.
So that was really fun. It was really fun. And my sister's a doctor. My daughter just graduated from nursing school, and I have friends who are nurses. So I was able to get all of the like, okay, can this happen? Like, what is the time frame? Like, what can I do on this? And so I am so proud of it. I'm so proud of the way I killed my character. Can I say that?
Nice. Well done. Hey, you know what? I've been on vacation before with my husband, and I've looked at over something. The one that I'm like, I have to find a way to use this is when we lived in New Zealand, and we went to this place where it's like boiling mud pits, and like I said I wasn't going to cough on air. Sorry, people, still trying to get over silly bronchitis. What do you call it? Like where there's hot springs, and hot water boiling up. Right. But when it boils up under the mud, it literally makes the mud boil. Like you can see it.
Oh,
bizarre. Yeah. And at one point there was like this path that had this little curve, and there was a whole lot of like trees and shrubs and stuff like that. And I just went, oh, what a great place to dump a body. And my husband and I were on vacation for our anniversary, and he just looks at me like, should I be scared? And I'm like, no, I'm just thinking, for a story. And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally, my husband and my kids will totally agree with me, because we were in New York for my son-in-law's graduation, and we were walking through Central Park, and it was a beautiful day. And I was like, okay, because, you watch like the CSI, or you watch, Blue Bloods or whatever. And you're like, okay, people die in the park all the time. I mean, that's what I get from those television shows. There's always bodies. So I was like, how do you get a body into and I was like, oh, I could totally, excuse me, I could totally see someone putting a body into a suitcase and rolling it through the park and just emptying it out. And then because you see people who are going from either their taxi or whatever and I'm like, that would be, and I was like, oh, I could, that would be how you do it. You'd put somebody into a suitcase, you'd roll them through, and then you'd dump them, and then you'd go, and no one would ever think twice about it. And my husband's like, and my daughter's like, Mom, really? And I was like, what? But this, because I was thinking okay, if you had someone to scream, because there's a lot of people in New York City, but you literally could walk through with your suitcase and no one would blink an eye.
Yeah.
So if anybody uses that idea, just, acknowledgements, credits. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm saying.
Well, one of the things that I love to do for the podcast is I love to make my guests look good and make their books sound interesting. And of course, I've read at least a portion of the books of the guests that I've had on, so that I can, talk like an intelligent human being. But I also like to make sure that as a podcast listener, I really love to go, ooh, great tip. I'm going to use this or that or whatever. So I'm trying to figure out, how are you going to give people advice about how they can get information when you're actually related to all of the people that you ask questions about? How lucky are you that you're related to a judge, a military person, a nurse, somebody in the law enforcement?
I think my best suggestion, and honestly, is if you are part of a writing community, put it out there, put feelers out there, because chances are somebody either knows somebody or is that person or has actually talked to somebody who'd be like, hey, I spoke with officer so-and-so. They were really helpful. Here's their information. Because let's be honest, most of these people love to talk about their jobs. I don't think I've ever met a single one who's been like, no, I don't want to talk about it. Well, that's not true. My CIA contact is like, yeah, I can't talk about that. I'm like, oh, so I'm like, what can you tell me that I can use? But for the most part, they want to talk about their stories or, whatever. And then I think, reaching out to them and just being like, hey, would you mind chatting with me? I think that's really the best way and the best tip, because I know for me, if I didn't have the people I was connected to, I would reach out to other people and say, hey, other authors, and say, hey, I'm trying to get information on this. Do you think your person would be willing to talk to me? And for the most part, if they're super kind, and most authors are super kind, they will be glad to give you some information, So I know I was talking to Lynn Blackburn, and she's working on a new series. And I was like, I'm brainstorming ideas for another series, and I actually have a character who, wouldn't it be fun if we could cross the characters, where your character is in my book and my characters in, or at least they meet up. And so she was like, oh, that would be really great. So I think that helps, just building those relationships up, and always being, and I think you put little credits in the back of your books, and they like seeing their names in there or whatever. Or for me, I put oh, thank you so and so, and all mistakes are my own. I get it.
Yeah.
But definitely reach out to the writing community as a whole, because they'll probably have some help. And then just start asking, especially if you're in smaller locations, ask your friends, do you know a police officer that I could chat to? Offer to buy them coffee or whatever, and they'll be glad to tell you some stories, or at least help you with procedure, because they probably more than anybody else hate when they see procedure or things done wrong. And so I think gives them a little bit of okay, finally somebody is going to do it right. And I think that is a huge kind of nod to their, to their profession. And so I think it's fine. I think that they will be really willing to to share their information.
Yeah. I guess I forget that other people are as excited about their job probably as I am about mine. Like you and I could just talk about writing all day. I forget that there are probably police officers who could sit around and just talk about, oh yeah, and then this other thing happened, to people all day.
Right. Well, and especially like it kind of helps, I think for me, like I see them kind of like being able to talk about the good parts of their career. I mean, yeah, there's some bad stuff that obviously happens, but they're also able to tell you some funny stories. I know I was sitting at dinner with our friends. He works in the DEA, and he was telling me this story, and I was like, and I just tucked it in the back of my head. I was like, I'm using that story. That's going to be in a book. It's going to, and in fact, my proposal that I've sent to my publisher, that is the first story. That is the idea that started that first story. So, I mean, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it gets the publication nod. But yeah, it's one of those things though, that like, you have to be careful, like your friends have to be careful, like anything they say can and will be used in a story.
Exactly.
So you just have to like, I'll give you a little, credit. I may even name a character after you, but
yeah.
Yes. Anything you say, just be forewarned. If it's good, I'm putting it in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And just having to do with the law enforcement thing, one of the things that was super helpful for me, so I'm just mentioning it in case it's helpful for anybody else. My friend Janice Cantori was on the Long Beach police force for like 20 years, and then started writing romantic suspense for Tyndale. And so I was asking her some questions about what police and medical examiners and stuff would do in my superhero series, which is set in Michigan. And so she was explaining that depending on where your book is set, city and state, what would happen and who exactly does what would be different in every area. So definitely remember to tell people if you're asking, somebody in, obviously if you ask somebody in the Army and a question and then you made your character in the Navy, that would be daft. But even if you ask a sheriff and then made the sheriff in your book be in a different state, you might accidentally have written something that wouldn't happen in that particular state. So
right. And that's true for even like my series with Walton, because in Walton, the town is small, that they have, I call it a deputy force. So it could be a police force, but they call themselves deputies. And then how do I cross, like in Deadly Deceit, they kind of cross into the Savannah area lines. Well, that's a different police force. If there's a crime on that side, you've got to be able to have the police officers work together. And will they work together? So like in Living Lies, I know that I had a DEA agent in Living Lies, and there was FBI, and not all of them enjoy working together or are willing to share information, but it kind of helped me because I was able to kind of like, use that to antagonize my characters or to cause stumbling blocks for them. And so you have to kind of know, and it just really kind of takes like a simple Google search sometimes to just be like, okay, what are the parameters of jurisdiction for an FBI agent versus CIA or versus local police or whatever, and that was kind of thing. Like I know in Living Lies, they have a murder, and well, the FBI could come in and help if the police force wants them to. Like they could invite them and be like, hey, or we have a missing person, and they bring them in. And so you can use that information to kind of be like, all right, I know how to, but it's good to have, it is good to know, because if you cross lines, like, a sheriff, you're going to have a wife of a police officer or a county sheriff's officer be like, this would, and they will email you. Readers will email you. If you got it wrong, they will email you.
Yeah. And now you're making me wonder, because you have both military and law enforcement background. I'm trying to remember if I've seen a TV show or a book that mixed, like made their plot be such that two different, what am I trying to say? Not military forces, but two different branches. That's what I mean, of the military, like were forced to work something together. Like on NCIS, everybody's in the Navy who works through that show. But like, I wonder if something were to ever happen where it'd be somebody from the Navy. And
it could, if you had two people in different branches. So like where we live here in Hawaii, you have military installation, you have Navy installation, you have a Marine Corps base, you have Air Force base. So you have all of them here. So if there was a crime committed, if it was committed on the Air Force base, but it was committed by an Army soldier,
Right.
you would have Army, investigation as well as the Air Force investigation, and they would be forced to work together, which would actually be really, really fun because, branches, like competition between branches, forget it. Like you would have that would be a lot of fun, a lot of fun to do. So
yeah. And now
now you get credit for that one. If anybody takes that, I did that.
Well, now I'm thinking you live in Hawaii, which is like forced confinement of a whole bunch of people living close to each other. So it seems even more likely that something like that could happen, in a place like Hawaii.
Yeah, I think there's been a handful of cases, I think like probably in the last 10 years where they've had situations. I think there was, and I'm going to probably totally mess this up, but I think there was the last one that I can think of was they had an Army soldier who was giving secrets away, and they had gone to his house and had his house locked down. It was like they stormed it, like they knew he was doing it or whatever. But and then that brings in all of the law enforcement people. You got FBI, you got everybody's involved because military people, they've got security clearances that give them access to specific information. And being where we are located in the Pacific, we're close to enemies in North Korea or whatever. So you could definitely use more global threat here. But I think, I think there was an episode of Hawaii Five-0, and I don't really watch Hawaii Five-0. I'm just going to apologize right now. I don't watch that show very much. But I think there was an episode where I was like, well, if somebody was here and they committed a crime, they could basically leave and fly off the island potentially before either the body is found or whatever. And how would you ever find them?
Right.
They could be gone. Another country.
Yeah.
I mean, we're close to a lot of foreign countries. So,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is so interesting. And now you got me thinking there's a show here in Sweden. I'm not 100% sure because I don't speak the language very well, which is to say almost not at all. I'm pretty sure it's a Swedish show, not a Danish show, but I am literally one train stop away from Denmark. So Malmö is on the water, and the other side of the Sound, which is, so I didn't know what a sound was until I lived here. It's a really narrow body of water that's much, much wider than a river. And I don't know how to explain it.
Very specific.
Yeah.
I mean, specific enough it got its own name.
Yeah, it's got its own name. It's the Sound. So someone created a show where, okay, so Malmö is on one side of the water and Copenhagen, Denmark is on the other side of the water. And as of 2006 or 2009 or pretty recently, they have a bridge now. So trains and cars go across the bridge. And so the show came out maybe last year, I think. And sorry, PG-13 warning. Somebody murdered someone and cut her in half and then placed her on the bridge. So her body was exactly 50-50 on the Swedish side and the Danish side of the line that marks the difference between the countries. And so immediately they had Danish police officers on this side of the body, Swedish police officers on that side of the body, all trying to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do? We can't all take half the body. So it's really interesting.
That is interesting. I wonder, does that when Interpol becomes involved? Because I mean, I don't know. I don't know. My son was asking me, he's like, what exactly is Interpol? And I'm like, well, they're the police that take care, I need to Google that or look at, but you know what I mean? I was like, I think they take care of when there's problems, would they police the whole world kind of,
international police.
Yeah. I was like, so they're watching, if there's a crime that is from somebody an American, happens in another country, they get involved because, they're kind of maybe the overseers. I don't know. Yeah. I'm probably wrong. And somebody's going to email me you are absolutely wrong. I'm like, I'm sorry.
I work for Interpol and that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. And then I'll be like, well, since you do, let's chat.
Exactly.
I will buy you a coffee and we can talk stories. You can help me. Help me understand. Tell me your secrets.
Oh boy, the life of a writer. So my car breaks down in the desert in this terrifying section where every scary movie that I've ever seen in a desert is running through my mind. And it's the first time that I really realized that you can be in the 21st century and have a new cell phone and be in a place where you still have no cell phone service. I was like, what? Wait, how can I not be safe? So the policeman finally comes. And by then my friend, my other writer friend, by the way, finally found me in my broken down car. And so she and I are standing by my broken down car, and he finally is there. And what can I do to help? And then we were like, so by the way, thank you so much for helping us. Can we ask you some questions? Because we're just realizing you couldn't murder somebody in this desert and easily get away with it, or you could die because somebody tried to murder you and you got away, but then your cell phone didn't work. And he's just looking at us like, I need your names and phone numbers and addresses. You know?
That's right. That's right.
No, not us. We're not going to murder someone.
Right. But if we were to, or if we were to write a character who does, we're just getting information.
And now, we're talking about county lines and the lines between, armed forces branches. And now I'm thinking Mason-Dixon line. What if a body was found on the Mason-Dixon line? I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know. I think there's and I think that's where we as writers get to be creative and because, again, like I was saying, there's only so many ways you can stalk somebody, but you can put where you get creative is where you put, because I think I was reading somewhere, someone asked a question about, are all romance plot lines the same? Is there some sort of outline? And the reality is that there is, from the time that story began, there's always been, you look at the Bible, there's an A, B, and C. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's the same thing with every Shakespeare play. So we all write in this manner, but it's what happens in those in-betweens, that causes the nuances to make a story different and reach and talk to different people. So that's why each of us coming from where we come from, where we've grown up, whatever we carry, we look at things differently. I think, you looking at, okay, we're stuck in the middle of nowhere, we're going to die. And that is exactly the kind of thought I would have. I'd be like, all right, this is how I'm going to die. The guy's going to come out and I'll have a whole story about the guy who's going to kill me. And I'll have the, epilogue story of what my husband and my kids are going to do once I'm gone. And I will have it all written out and done by the time the police officer or the tow truck comes to help me with my car. And that's just the way that it is. I will go out and I tell my kids this, and they hate this about me because when most parents probably tell their kids, honey, make sure your cell phone's charged, because if you're stuck somewhere, you want to be able to call. I'm like, if your cell phone's not charged, we will not be able to track you. The FBI will not be able to track you. We will not be able to hit the pings off the radar. The guy's going to take you, throw you over the, take your phone, and then we're going to think you're in Sweden, and you're totally in the wrong direction. I'll go the extra mile to just rein in the thought that you could die, and this is how it will happen. And my kids are like, okay, Mom. They're going to, I probably need to sell more books to pay for their therapy for the rest of their lives.
You got to ask yourself, though, for all the writers in the world, and particularly all the writers who are writing crime, horror, suspense, thrillers, are their kids as a whole more disturbed or actually safer in the world because they've already had all the scenarios run through for them?
Yeah, I was going to say, are they healthy? Is that are they mentally healthy? I don't know for sure, but I do know my kids will constantly think. We moved to Egypt, and the worst thing I could have done was Google what happens in Egypt, all this stuff. But we got there, and I told my kids, I was like, you're not allowed to walk on the streets by yourself. And Egypt is beautiful, beautiful country. Where we lived was beautiful, and we did walk on we did walk. It wasn't a big deal, but I walked with them. You still had to be diligent. And so I told him, I said, because here's the deal. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Taken, but this is literally how this happened. I was like, you will get taken, and they will take you across the border into Africa. You will be sold to the highest bidder for it to be their 15th wife. I said, and then you'll be a slave for the rest of your life, and we will never be able to find you because we live in a foreign country. There is no CIA. There is no FBI. There is no 911. You're gone. We will not be able to find you. And so I literally told that to I think at the time it was I had a 4th grader, a 5th grader, fourth, fifth, and eighth grader or seventh grader. So could you imagine, like, you're 8 years old and your mom's telling you how you will be sold into like slavery and be some man's, but they're all here. They're all safe. So whether it helped or not, I don't know, but I'm going to go with it did help them. It gave them that little bit of fear to like, be like, this is, because that's how I live. Like, I feel like when I'm going down the stairwell at the hospital, I'm like, this is where people get mugged or knocked out or, whatever. Because that's my thought process. It's unhealthy. I need therapy. I need therapy, clearly, or at least I need to just keep writing all these stories down.
Yeah.
But it's good. At least I give my characters like, okay, this is what could happen and this is why it could happen. And at least it could be plausible. Because in my head, it's always plausible that I'm going to get mugged going to the mall.
Okay, so now since I also write romantic comedy, now I'm thinking, okay, what I'm imagining the husband of this writer who's in the military, he's career military, like, is he just like pulling out his hair, shaking his head, going, stop scaring our children, these things will never happen? Or is he like, yeah, and also this?
Yeah, it's funny because I think my husband does play into it a little bit. My middle daughter was dating a guy, and
that's got to be the worst.
Yeah. So it was funny because and I don't want to call her out on this, but she, as most young adults, and she was a young adult at this time, so we really don't have any say. She's 18, she's an adult, she can make her best decisions, which weren't best at the time. And so she went on she told she was going to be at some place, because we were in Virginia and they were in Texas. And so we were, we kind of keep an eye on them or whatever. And she was going to go on this date with this guy. And so we didn't have she wouldn't give us any information on the guy. And that was kind of been one of our things when our children dated. We're like, hey, we need to know their names. We really want to meet them, like, first and foremost. If you're going to date our child, like, we need to meet you or whatever. And so she wouldn't give us any information. And so right away, like, our suspicions, like, up here. And the kid is totally a good kid. Nothing wrong with him or whatever. But she was just being so, like, she just didn't want to tell us. She wanted it to be like her own thing until she figured out where the relationship was going or whatever. And so we did our own investigation. And we found out what his name is, what dorm he was staying in, like, and so we were like sending her this information by text, like, we know this and we know where that is. And we had her old computer was still in our possession, so it had like the tracking on it. So we're like, we know where you're at. And so she's literally telling this guy this, and he is like, they're going out to go get tacos. And he's like, I feel like there's going to be a sniper sitting on a roof somewhere. It's going to take me out. And we just let them roll with that. We didn't correct him. We were like, you're absolutely right. Be forewarned. We've got eyes everywhere, because that's what we have to do as parents. We're going to be there to protect our children no matter what. But if they believe a little bit of, fiction about what our capabilities are, then we're not going to correct them on that. They're going to know.
Oh my gosh, Natalie, talking to you, I'm just thinking, of all the podcasts that I've listened to, I would already be thinking of storylines for thrillers, suspense, military, fun things that you could do with romantic comedies with parents. I mean, I think that just about anybody writing any kind of fiction listening to us today has got to already be having at least 3 more new ideas in their heads.
I hope so.
Oh man.
I know. I've got plenty of ideas. I'm like, all right, I'm going to write some of these myself.
Yeah. Hurry. Okay. The good news is you don't have to hurry up and like take notes while we're talking, because you'll have the recording. You can be like,
perfect.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's right. I know that's the best thing about technology. Even like my critique partner and I, we Vox each other, and I'll be like, oh, we'll Vox ideas. And they'll be like, I got to save this because I got to go back and like listen to it because I will forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, I really should let you go, but sorry, one more question. So we were talking about we would eventually wind back around to brainstorming being your favorite part of the writing process. So do you have any tips or do you want to tell us like how you do it? Do you do it by yourself or with friends? And like, yeah.
I think so. Going back to the Stephen King book that he talks about how he does not talk to anybody or get any, like he doesn't tell his idea to anyone. I don't even think he tells his wife. I know his wife is the first person to know anything about his writing or his stories, but he said something about you don't tell anybody because they're going to tell you something that's going to make you change your mind or, shift your things. So I think the first bit of like advice I would get is to find somebody you trust to either tell you, like, once you've fleshed out your story, your ideas on like paper or whatever, to be like, okay, this is where I'm having a question. Then you can ask them and they can give you your input. But for me, the way I start with my ideas is pretty much if I'm watching TV and I see a television show, or I see something in the news, or I hear a story, like talking with our friend in the DEA, he tells me this bit of information. I'm like, okay, so I have the idea. That's the nugget, or the method of murder for deadly deceit. That's the nugget. Now I need to write figure out oh, is that me? Sorry.
Okay.
My husband's in Korea and he's calling me. Stop. Oh my goodness. That's so embarrassing. I'm so sorry. I thought I turned it off.
Hi, Natalie's husband.
Sorry. So that's the military life right there. You get phone calls randomly when
there
you're
you go. So just help somebody go, oh yeah, I should do stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Least expected phone calls in the middle of church, in the middle of podcasts. But what I was saying is I will take those nuggets and I will flesh out my story. I'll come up with, characters. I will come up with a semi plot line, and then I'm an outliner. I don't pants write very often, but so I'll outline as best as I can, like kind of, and usually what ends up happening is I come up with scene ideas. I'm like, oh, I really like that scene idea. And then I figure out how to like work that in there. And then I will talk to my critique partner, who I've had since 2013. So we've been going on 6 years now. And I trust her explicitly. She will be honest with me. She'll be like, this isn't working, or you need to bring this up a little bit more. And so I'll listen to those, that feedback. And then I kind of like, will start writing it. But if I have I'll be like, all right, I don't have like a good motivation for this. Like this person's motive is not strong enough. Like clearly he could be, I'll voice those questions to her and she'll be like, okay, let's talk about this. And we'll run through some ideas. And then I pick because usually just doing that, just talking about it, something is going to be like a click in your head. And you're like, oh, I'm totally going to do that. Like, that's a really good idea. Kind of like crossing, putting military branches against each other. Like, that's really smart. Somebody should write that story. Somebody should write that story. Write that down and write that story. But that's how it happens. Like, you just talk story, or you talk about the things that you like in other stories. And you're like, okay, how could I like emulate that twist or whatever and make it my own and do that. And so that's sort of how the brainstorming process works for me. Tends to be character or like something specific, a little nugget, and then I just kind of tangent off that.
Nice. And do you do it on paper and physically, or do you do it within a computer program?
I'm a paper and pen girl. I do some stuff on the computer, but there's something about being able to write it down and then, having it there so I can see it and flip back. I feel like with the computer, technology defies me. So I feel like the computer hates me and is going to try to do anything it can to make my life harder. And the more we get more technology with these computer or phones that are like computers and watches that are like computers, I'm like, I can't handle it. So I try to just write, and then I'll put in pieces. Like I'll start, what I'll do is I will take my ideas, because typing is much faster than writing. I start brainstorming like the outline of the story or the synopsis. I'll do that on the computer. And then I end up with like 45 documents that say synopsis 1, synopsis 2, synopsis 3, synopsis 3.5 or 3.A or whatever, because I'll end up, and then I'm confusing myself because I'm like, where did I pull that one?
Yeah.
It's just a mess. I'm kind of a mess as a writer, but I guess it works for me. I probably have needed more books under my belt to really hone it in, but I mean, it's fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a tactile person. I like to have the things in my hands, like my hands to actually be doing things. Sometimes I wish that, that writing books required just a little bit more building, like even like putting a puzzle together. Like I have physical pieces of the puzzle that I'm laying down, and I wish that I had something more tactile, when it comes to writing. I haven't quite figured out how to create something that works for me that way. But
yeah, I know people who do note cards, and I have tried to do the note card method, but I end up like writing like the first 7 note cards, and then I'm like, okay, I can't do that. And then my first book, Living Lies, I ended up writing all of the chapters, like the the main point of each chapter, like what was happening, who was involved, whatever. I wrote it, and then I ended up cutting like slivers of like cutting the papers and then like placing it because the story was a little bit out of sequence where it needed to be. And so I had to put them in, and I had it all laid out. And heaven forbid anybody come in there or there were a gust of wind come and knock my things down because it would be all over.
Yeah.
But I've done that.
Yeah. You just reminded me, and that's the thing with moving so many times. Sometimes I forget what I used to do that worked. But you just reminded me that I have had in the past like a pile of 4 or 5 different colored sticky notes, and I put the ideas on one color per major character, and then have a wall or a board or something, because then I literally do have the tactile thing and I can move things around. And
yeah, and I have a whiteboard. Like if I get to a part in the story where I'm like, okay, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, and then I can erase it or I can add something. And then like I started doing, I printed a paper. I'm looking at it right now on my desk. I printed a paper, and I can show you without messing this up. So it's the 3-act structure, and I literally just printed it off of the computer, and it has like beginning, inciting incident or whatever. And then I put like notes, like I specifically put notes on this one of the color of my character's eyes because I tend to forget that as I'm writing. But I did that for, let's see, what book is this? So this is my last book, Silent Child. So I basically redid it and then just wrote on the bottom, like, okay, if the beginning is like the first like plot point and it's the beginning, what is that, and then the next one's the inciting incident, and then I can like actually put, so this would be like what your cards would be, your index cards or whatever, and then I write on there, and that actually seemed to be really helpful just for me to follow, because I will get myself stuck in the middle of the book and I'm like, I don't know where this is going or why this is going anywhere. And so this helps kind of keep me like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. This is where I need to heighten the suspense, or I need to heighten the action, or I can put in a smaller moment in the story.
Yeah. I think that if you're the kind of person who gets on the road and has the map out first, and you're like, I know that I'm going to wherever, I think that writing from one plot point to the next one is like, works if you're the kind of person who likes to have a map. Like I know first that I need to go to Chum's Corners, and then I turn right when I get there. So you can be like, I have no idea what happens between now and Chum's Corners, but that's what I'm going to do. And
exactly.
You can still have the excitement of surprising yourself with what you come up with, but you're not, I hate to say it this way, but this is the way I feel when I'm writing. You're not wasting time going off in different directions that now you're just going to have to cut it and throw it away.
Right. And I think like it's interesting because when I did Deadly Deceit, I felt like that was a more pants written, like I pantsed on that one. And that sounds so weird. I pantsed. I wrote that one more on like the seat of my pants, because I got to a point where I was like, I don't know who the bad guy is in this story. Like, I don't know why did he get killed? Like, what was the point of that? And so I really like had to just kind of like, as I was writing, I was like, oh, okay, this is why. And so like little things started. So that was the story that like surprised me, because it was like a more like organic, I guess is what they like to call it, a more organic type story, where the first one was a little bit more plotted out. I think just because I needed to get the pieces in. Yeah. And then book 3, I had been thinking about that story for a long time. And so that one was hard because in my head, the story had been playing in my head for the whole time I was writing book 2.
Yeah.
Thinking about the characters. So then when I sat down, it was like I was crippled because I could not get it out of my head onto the page the way that I wanted to. And I literally sent it into my publisher with tears because I was like, this is so bad. Like it doesn't look like what I thought it was going to look like, and I sent that in on like May 15th, flew to Texas because my daughter was graduating from college, flew there, got an email, because I think it was like a Tuesday. I got an email on like Friday from my editor, and she was like, I love this story. I could not put it down. And I was in Panera crying my eyeballs out over my salad because I was like, it was just like, so I don't know what God did to it from the time I hit send to the time it landed in her inbox, but I was so excited that it was just the encouragement that I needed, that I was like, okay, that, and then you get the blank page in front of you and you're like, I don't know how to write stories. Like, what is a sentence? So, you know what I mean? It's like as comforting as like that moment was, it's gone in an instant the next time you look at a blank page on your computer screen.
Right. Oh my gosh. This is so much fun talking to you. I don't want to stop, but I'm looking at the time thinking, oh, all right. Anybody who's been like telling themselves, I'm just going to keep on walking on the treadmill until this interview is over. I'm so sorry that we made you walk so much.
We're sorry, but not sorry. You get to eat that extra piece of pie for Thanksgiving.
Okay. See, I love you, Natalie.
You just got to spin it. That's all.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. Well, I really think that you've mentioned like a whole bunch of things that people will be able to think through, like, how does this work for me? How does that work for me? And like give people more ideas about what they can do with their own writing. So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure. I never think I know anything, but I'd love to talk about it. So it works.
Yeah. Well, listen, where can people find you online and find your books?
Well, definitely. I think all of my books are available at all the retail sites. So any place that you normally buy books from, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I think Target and Walmart have it available online. So that's pretty cool. And then I am on social media. I'm on Instagram. I have a Facebook author page and I have Twitter. If I had to like rank those on where I'm the most active, it's probably Instagram and then Facebook and then Twitter. But I'm probably equally active on Facebook. And I also have a newsletter. I call them my newsies, and that's where all of my first like behind the scenes and first information for covers and book news goes out. So, and I do a monthly giveaway for a book depository gift card or Amazon gift card. So I'm always giving away books. So.
Nice. And are you Natalie Walters everywhere, or should they just go to your website and figure out what your name is? Do you have
I'm Natalie Walters pretty much everywhere. I'm mostly like, it's like Natalie, apparently there's another Natalie Walters in the world. Who knew? But there's Instagram, it's Natalie Walters Writer. On Twitter, I think it's Nat Walters Write or something like that. So probably the best way would be to go to Instagram. But on Facebook, it's Natalie Walters Writer. Author? I don't know. I don't search myself. Sorry.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So website is www.nataliewalterswriter.com, and you can click on the links that'll send you to my social media. So perfect.
We'll do that. Awesome. Great. Okay. So Living Lies is out and Deadly Deceit just came out a couple of weeks ago. And then book 3 will be out sometime in 2020.
The end of March 30th.
March. Oh my gosh. Yes. So fast.
I know. It's so fast. In fact, I thought it was coming out in May, and then I went on Amazon and I saw, it's coming out in March. I lost 2 months. So it's like, okay, I've got to get all the marketing stuff done at least. But I mean, leave it to Amazon to tell me when my book was coming. Right. My book is releasing. I live in story world, all the other stuff. I'm like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Trying to hold it together.
Yeah. Well, it was so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the show.
Oh, I had such a good time. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. So thank you so much for having me.